In the late 1980s, when night fell in parts of Nigeria, fear came with it. Shops closed early, streets emptied faster than usual, and police officers, armed and trained, moved with caution. Because there was a name being whispered everywhere, a name that could shut down entire neighborhoods, a name that made even law enforcement hesitate: Lawrence Anini. To some, he was a criminal. To others, he was a ghost. And to the police, he was a nightmare they could not wake up from. Gunshots echoed through the night. Police checkpoints were ambushed, and newspapers screamed the same headline over and over again: Nigeria is under siege. But before Lawrence Anini became the most feared armed robber in the country, before the myths, the rumors, and the bloodshed, he was just another young man trying to survive. Lawrence Anini was not born a criminal. He did not arrive in this world holding a gun, nor was his future written in blood from the start. He grew up in a Nigeria struggling with economic hardship, a time when poverty pushed many young men toward desperation. Jobs were scarce, opportunities were limited, and for people like Anini, survival often meant bending the rules. At first, it was small things, petty crimes, quick money, nothing that suggested he would one day bring an entire police force to its knees. But something changed. Anini discovered something powerful: fear. He learned that fear could open doors faster than honesty, that a weapon commanded respect quicker than words. And once he tasted that power, he wanted more. Lawrence Anini's first major armed robbery didn't just succeed. It worked too well. The operation was fast, violent, efficient. The police arrived late. Witnesses were too scared to talk, and Anini walked away with money and confidence. That moment marked the beginning of something dangerous. He wasn't acting alone anymore. Anini began recruiting men like himself, desperate, angry, and fearless. Together they formed a gang that moved quickly and struck without warning. Banks, checkpoints, highways. Each attack became more violent than the last, and while the police believed they were chasing ordinary criminals, they failed to realize something important. This was no longer just armed robbery. This was the rise of a criminal empire, and Lawrence Anini was just getting started. By the time the police realized what they were dealing with, it was already too late. Lawrence Anini and his gang were no longer just robbing banks or vehicles. They were hunting authority. Police checkpoints became targets. Patrol officers were ambushed in the dark. Some were shot at close range before they could even react. The message was clear: no one was safe. Entire neighborhoods shut down after sunset. Drivers avoided certain roads completely, and civilians learned to keep their eyes down, because looking too long could cost you your life. Anini struck with precision. He studied police routines, memorized shift changes, and attacked when they were weakest. Each successful raid fed his legend. Each escaped arrest embarrassed the authorities. And slowly, something terrifying happened. Fear stopped belonging to the people. It belonged to him. News of Anini's crimes spread faster than the police could respond. Radio stations whispered his name. Newspapers printed his face. Parents warned their children to be indoors before nightfall. Police morale collapsed. Officers were afraid to wear uniforms off-duty. Some refused night patrols. Others resigned entirely. Never before had a criminal exposed the weaknesses of law enforcement so publicly. The state had lost control, and Lawrence Anini knew it. As fear grew, myth took over. Stories began circulating on the streets. They said bullets could not kill him, that charms protected his body, that police guns jammed when aimed at him. Some claimed officers shot him point blank, and he simply walked away. Whether true or not didn't matter, because belief was stronger than fact. Soon, even hardened policemen hesitated before pulling the trigger. Anini was no longer just a man. He had become a legend, a walking nightmare. And legends don't get caught easily. Every empire collapses the same way, not from outside pressure, but from within. As Lawrence Anini's crimes grew bolder, so did his recklessness. He trusted fewer people. He punished mistakes harshly, and paranoia began to guide his decisions. Gang members started disappearing. Some were arrested, Others were executed for suspected betrayal. Fear, once used to control the streets, now controlled his own men. And when fear turns inward, loyalty dies. Behind closed doors, something changed. Police intelligence improved. Safe houses were discovered. Weapons caches were seized. Routes that once guaranteed escape suddenly led to ambushes. Someone was talking. Gang members, facing long prison sentences or death, made choices. Some spoke to save themselves. Others spoke out of revenge. Bit by bit, the myth of invincibility began to crack. Lawrence Anini was still dangerous, but now he was visible. Then came the moment no one believed would ever happen. Lawrence Anini was shot, not killed, but wounded. The bullet shattered more than flesh, it shattered belief. For the first time, the streets whispered a new question. What if he can bleed? The man once thought untouchable was now limping, hiding, and desperate. And the police sensed blood in the water. What followed was one of the most intense manhunts in Nigerian history. Roadblocks appeared overnight. Security forces coordinated across regions. Informants were protected and rewarded. The net tightened. Every safe house was compromised. Every escape route blocked. And finally, Lawrence Anini ran out of places to hide. It didn't happen in a dramatic shootout. There was no final speech, no last stand. When Lawrence Anini was finally captured, he was weak, injured, and exhausted. The man who once ruled the night was now surrounded by armed officers in daylight. Handcuffs closed around his wrists, and just like that, the legend fell silent. News of his arrest spread like wildfire. People poured into the streets, not to celebrate, but to confirm it was real. For the first time in years, the fear loosened its grip. In court, Lawrence Anini no longer looked invincible. There were no charms, no weapons, no followers. Just a man facing the consequences of his choices. Witnesses testified, survivors spoke. Families of slain officers wept. The same public that once whispered his name in fear now watched him in silence. The myth was gone. Only reality remained. The verdict was swift. Lawrence Anini was sentenced to death. When the execution was carried out, it did not make the front pages with celebration. There was no joy, only relief. The streets grew quieter. Police patrols returned. Life slowly resumed. The nightmare was over. Today, Lawrence Anini's name still echoes in Nigerian history, not as a hero, not as a legend, but as a warning. A reminder of what happens when desperation meets violence and fear is allowed to rule unchecked. Because no matter how powerful a criminal becomes, no reign lasts forever. Fear may rise, but it always falls.